Welcome to the February 2023 reading for the Monterey Bay Poetry Consortium. My name is Kent Latham. I'm the coordinator for this series, and I'm filling in as MC today for our usual host, Bob Nielsen. This is, I believe, our 35th Zoom-based online event here. Prior to COVID, we met in person each month at Old Capitol Books in Old Town Monterey, but we feel extremely fortunate to have been able to not only continue our series online and uninterrupted since March of 2020, but to actually increase our audience and readers to include folks from across the country, across the state, the country, and the world. I know we were all moving past Zoom fatigue at this point. We've come out the other side probably by now, but we remain really grateful to this platform to continue providing us with a safe, healthy, and inclusive access space for everyone to be part of these events. So thanks for being here, especially to our two readers and friends today from the Central Valley, who would have had a long drive otherwise. So thanks for being able to join us from the comfort of your own homes. As you know, the Monterey Bay Poetry Consortium is a community of poets in, from, and affiliated with the Monterey Bay area, and the series is the oldest continuously running literary series in our Central Coast region. We carry on the tradition established by John Lowy as a former local chapter of the National Writers Union. And as probably everybody here knows, John was our founder, our dean, and our host, our guide for decades. And we owe everything to him. And he's here today, and we're just perpetually grateful, endlessly grateful. We've also been graciously hosted by many local bookstores and coffee shops over the years, most recently, pre-pandemic, by the wonderful folks at Old Capitol Books. And even though we're keeping the series online for a while longer here, we still enthusiastically encourage you to support their brick and mortar store at 482 Alvarado Street in Old Town Monterey, along with all of your other local independent neighborhood bookstores. They keep literature alive, and they make it all possible for us. You can also always befriend us on Facebook at the Monterey Bay Poetry Consortium. And I strongly encourage you again to check out almost a full day and a half's worth of recordings from our past 3 years of readings on our YouTube channel, also Monterey Bay Poetry Consortium on YouTube. Today, specifically, thank you for interrupting your Super Bowl parties or pre-game parties to share time with us this afternoon. I know there's just as many people who care passionately about professional sports as there are those of us who don't even know which teams are playing today. So I'm grateful that you chose to honor and support some of our culture's other noteworthy talents here as well. As poets, we believe that what we care about is what we talk about. If poets are the world's unacknowledged legislators, then our words are its acknowledged legislation. Our words are proof of our concerns. And so I want to take a quick moment at the beginning of our time together here to recognize some of the most vital concerns that have occurred to impact our shared communities, both local and global, since our last reading, because I know these are things that are going to start emerging in our poems soon enough. Our strength is with the 33,000 victims and hundreds of thousands of struggling survivors of the devastating earthquakes in Syria and Turkey, and also with the ongoing victims and resistance fighters of the invasion of Ukraine. Our strength is with everyone who is affected by the extreme flooding from the Central Coast, Central Valley in January, especially those locally who lived along the Salinas River, hard-hit coastal communities like Capitola. And as I talked with Linda earlier, those who live near any rivers and any flood areas and were affected. Our strength is with every Black American this month, especially, but always, who continue to celebrate the persistence of past, present, and future legacies and accomplishments, despite America's endlessly violent attempts to erase them as individuals and identities. The same goes for our queer and trans communities, our Jewish and Muslim communities, our Asian American and Latin American communities, and all marginalized members of the global majority. And especially locally here, our strength is with the members of our indigenous communities, such as the Ohlone, Esalen, and Rumsen peoples, on whose land and in whose presence we share our lives here along the Monterey Bay area. So thank you for helping to turn your care into words and your words into actions on behalf of the rights and lives of every beautiful human in our midst. Today, we're going to hear from two wonderful Central Valley poets, Linda Scheller and Gary Thomas. Each author will read for about 20 to 25 minutes, And our tradition is to go alphabetically by last name. So Linda will read first, and then she'll be followed by Gary. I'll introduce each of them before they share their poems. So without further ado, sit back, get comfy, stay warm, enjoy a cup of tea or glass of vino, whatever your preference is, and prepare to immerse yourself in some incredible poetry this afternoon. Linda Scheller is a Central Valley poet, playwright, book reviewer, and writing instructor. She's the author of 2 books of poetry, Wind and Children from Main Street Rag in 2022, and Fierce Light from Future Cycle Press in 2017, as well as a chat book, Halcyon. Her poetry, plays, and book reviews are published in more than 80 international journals and anthologies, including Colorado Review, Poem on the Seawall, Notre Dame Review, Terrain, Poetry East, Plays, and Hawaii Pacific Review. Recent honors include the Arcana Editors Book Choice Award, finalist for the Barrow Street Book Award, and the Word Works Washington Prize, as well as nominations for Best of the Net and the Pushcart Prize. She's a founding board member of the Modesto Stanislaw Poetry Center and co-hosts and produces the radio programs Arts of the San Joaquin Valley and Women of the Valley for KCBP. Her website is her name, lindascheller.com, and it is gorgeous, and I encourage you to check it out, find out more about her and all of her accomplishments. And there it is in the link for you to follow. So, Linda, thank you so much for being here. Take us away.
Thank you so much, Kent and Jennifer and John and everyone who's here today. I so appreciate this. I thought I'd start with some poems from my first book, Fierce Light. And this is a collection of persona poems based on research that I did into the lives and work of women from world history and culture. And I'll start with the first poem in this book, Autorretrato Ultimo, Frida Kahlo, 1907 to 1954. I understand him and forgive him, even his dalliance with my sister. He is a frog of exceptional ardor, moved to excess by women, their skin in myriad hues, their flowery scent. Life is a garden and love a bouquet we cannot help but breathe. He insists I am his intellectual equal at least. He tells everyone he is awed by my art since I interpret colors he cannot see. He married me twice, and we live in 2 houses joined by a breezeway, mine, azul, overlooking a courtyard filled with monkeys, deer, and little dogs. My easel stands beside the bed where I spend my days arguing with pain, limbs decaying, mad with misfortune. I smoke and laugh at my own chistes, brush in hand, squinting at the mirror. Drape the communist flag over my casket, mi amor, when I die, because I wish never to return. Bring my body to the crematorium. Feed me to the furnace so my long black hair can burn, a writhing halo that flails goodbye. This is The White Rose, written for Sophie Scholl. She was a member of the resistance movement in Nazi Germany, and she and her brother and some of their college friends produced leaflets that they distributed urging resistance to the regime. She lived from 1921 to 1943. We walked through darkness on narrow paths. The meadow afterwards was exultant with flowers. Ja, Mutti, I remember Jesus. So must you. Wherever they burn books, they will also in the end burn human beings, said Heine. Our nation stands at the edge silent. The abyss writhes with endless shame. Ach, Mutti, those few little years. We bid the people resist, stop the murders, end the war. If speaking truth is treason, then our guilt is balefire. Someone had to make a start. The war is already lost, but God's scourge demands my head. What does my death matter? The leaflets fluttered like white birds in the quiet atrium. Murky black lake, I dive, expecting to rise. The sun still shines. And this is the last poem in the book. It's The Light of Hope. And this is Benazir Bhutto, 1953 to 2007. And it's written for all girls, all students all over the globe who deserve the right to an education. Dirt floor, bare walls. Sun rays stream from high windows. Daughters of the tribes bend over desks. Their pens scratch. When I come to the door, they do not look up. Their shawls spill over hunched shoulders. A snowy mountain, a cloudless sky, a grassy hillside, a rain of crimson petals in fierce light. Well, I found that one book was not enough, and I keep reading biographies of women and I keep writing poems, not so much now in first person, but I was in the library last week and I saw a name in the shelves, and there aren't that many names of women, I must say. So there's the name, Daisy Bates. Oh, who's that? And I read this biography and wrote this poem for her. She lived from 1914 to 1999. Imagine when you were 12, learning that your mother was lured from her home and raped, murdered, and thrown in the river by 3 white men who were never convicted, never tried, never charged with a crime. Imagine Daisy Bates' anguish and horror when she learned this was her mother's fate. From despair's depths, she emerged and raged. Injustice must not stand. Daisy pledged her life to equality of access, opportunity, and protection under the law. 2. Another window, broken by a thrown stone wrapped in a note, "We will kill you." Crosses burned on her lawn. Phone calls late at night hissing of Daisy's lynching. The governor sent the National Guard to block the Little Rock Nine, guns out, while thousands of screaming protesters shoved the teens and spat on their clothes. Federal law meant nothing to segregationists intent on keeping Central High School white. 3. She solicited families willing to risk the contempt of thousands, loss of jobs, incessant threats, and danger. 9 youth braved the mobs, and Daisy counseled them, saying, "Remember, the world is watching you." Day after day, year after year, she pressured politicians and organized actions to further racial equality. Eyes forward, head high, she waded through hatred's maelstrom and turning, offered both her hands. That's part of a manuscript in progress, which I've tentatively called Laurels. And at the end of my section, I'll read one more from that collection. So now I'm turning to Wind and Children, my second book. This is based on my career as a public elementary school teacher, 36 years in Ceres, California, serving mostly poor families, immigrant families, migrant laborers. And it was for me as much an education as, as it was a chance to teach what I knew and what I was learning. This poem, Olivero Road, was published in a journal called In the Grove, which was created and edited by our new poet laureate, Lee Herrick. And this is Olivero Road. The boy carries a rifle beside his flowering pride, slight shoulders squared over thin hips, swinging his weaponry before him. One of my ex-students gone out to kill. Birds and cats replace the unseen enemy that holds him down. Twisted corpses litter the highways and molder in the alleys. Later, he watches the slate blue eye writhe and taunt him, flaunting mansions, Mercedes, and silent women while guitars and drums burn his blood. The children admire the shallow grave where a 16-year-old and her lover buried her battered son. He is free of the closet, the silence and blows, the bruises. It's nightmare on Olivero Road all the time. Sitting on the sofa beside her son, Joseph's mother was shot dead by her boyfriend. Satan told him to do it. Satan is always right here. Amy slept in a box outside the trailer driven there by the fumes of methamphetamine production. Hell always looks better obscured by haze. Peach crate houses crammed together in narrow, decrepit streets, broken toys and falling fences, crying babies, barking pit bulls, fighting cocks crowing and strutting. The women jumpstart the dented sedan and drive to the mall for a vacation surrounded by the best life has to offer. The men drink and drive past the orchards, laughing, accelerating. Monday morning, their children enter my classroom with bright, dirty faces and excited stories of guns and pregnancy, funerals and jail. They leave reluctantly for the mud and clamor of home. Misty, Jesus, Star, Esperanza. The sunset, a raw throat, screaming. This next poem was published in Poetry East. It's called The Examination. Heads bent over papers, my students sit hunched and silent, like a cloud of butterflies forced to earth. Their music is stilled, faces pulled down in unnatural gravity, as if the premonition of age had visited them, coating their wings. This is how. In the center of the diner, a woman in a hijab sat writing, while her little boy dropped a ball which rolled this way and that. He trotted after it, bent to retrieve the ball, returned to his mother, dropped and retrieved, returned and dropped. A white-haired man with a paper cup in his hand shuffled to the center from the opposite side. He stopped behind the boy's mother, lifted his cup, and dumped it over the seated woman's head. Ice slid down her hijab and skittered over the floor. He yelled, "Get that brat out of here and go back to wherever you came from." The woman jumped up and shouted, "You bad man, my son did nothing wrong." The boy cried, and my daughter hid under our table. I sat in shocked silence. I sat and did nothing. I said nothing. Nothing. I sat in silence and did nothing. The manager ran over and yelled at the man, told him to get out and never come back. The manager apologized to the woman and gave her a package of terry cloth towels so she could wipe the soda from her hijab. I wanted to apologize to the woman. I wanted to tell her she is welcome here. I wanted to tell her I thought her son was very well behaved, but I was afraid and said nothing. 20 years later, one of my students asks how the Holocaust could have happened. I tell them about the woman in the hijab and her son, the old man and the manager, and how I watched and did nothing, walked past her and said nothing. This is how. Thursday evening. Done with grading papers and planning for tomorrow, I carry my bags outside the classroom. Across the hall, young mothers sit at desks with babies at their feet. For free, they can learn a new language, learn to read and write, learn to raise their children in a world of machines. Trees shade the breezeway and the bright field sighs. Beyond the playground fence, goats pause in their grazing and lift their heads to gauge the sun's position relative to a distant horizon. Nighthawks call. Long shadows guide me home. Parse the sky. Late August, the roads buzz with chopper trucks swirling specks of stalk in their reckless wake, shedding veils of dust. Windows, cars, and leaves wear erosion's coat and shiver in the sluggish dawn. Silage trails lead to mown fields, brittle arrays like grids of broken pencils. What the corn wrote, lifted from its fingers by wind, is anybody's guess. Increasingly, we humans think we can buy our way out of the mess we've made. I'm old enough to know nature's having none of that. Tasteless tomatoes and manicured orchards edge this parched acre. But sometimes a coyote passes through, or an owl shrieks in the darkness. Ghosts of oak galleries stand sentinel in the parallel world of the past where the air was clean and the river ran clear. Across the road, late corn writes on the amber sky. Polar ice melts, oceans rise, and weather patterns snap like sheets, spraying hurricanes and lightning that torches California. I fill the car with heirlooms and photos, cat carriers by the door. All those years of teaching science, what will become of them? I'm old enough to know this won't be my problem much longer. My dear children, dear students, I can only pity you. The young march in the streets. Parse the sky for signs of fire, vectors of change. New trees, end of April. Sweetheart cherry, flavor crest peach. The pulse of earth runs up the shaft. Sun rays warm the donkeys' backs. Clouds billow silver. The river calls demanding more, and you answer. In the classroom, a sparrow's last hours smash the glass. Your dead mentor smiles among slivers on stained carpet. The children bury the feathered emissary. You slip out, locking the door behind you. And I like to close with this poem, which first appeared in Homestead Review. Thank you, Jennifer. And this was the greatest field trip of all time, Monterey. Dolphins, the captain said, straight ahead. But all I saw were specks on the colorless horizon. No, there, called someone, pointing to the right. 7 dolphins skipping on the surface hurtled toward us, leaping up and arcing down. They dove under the boat, then rose alongside, skimming through waves, up for air and straight for speed, racing us, darting beneath the boat and up again, leaping in tandem and flying in the rolling swells. Water and air, silver sky, silver skin, they swam with us to greet scores of teeming, streamlined kin, flashing fins and dipping flukes. And when we left the swirling pod, to swam a while beside the boat, as if the world were new again, and childhood friends might kindly go with us a little of the way home. I'm going to end with one of the other poems from my manuscript in progress, and this is for the Baroness Elze von Freytag-Loringhoven, who was, and this is the title, the mother of Dada. Barbed wire corset, carburetor vase. A woman of influence strides Greenwich Village half naked with a coal scuttle on her head. Frightened men and scandalized women gape and sneer and laugh. Ah, but Marcel, isn't it true? Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Embrace ugliness, flaunt desire. Any and all cast-off objects may become art. Scramble language, flip roles. Any and all cast-off artists may become new. And in our wildest minds, we are. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Linda. Thank you. What a wonderful trip through history and the figures in it and the emotions and the stories and the experiences. I mean, everything was there. All of our griefs and all of our joys. Wow. I think, no one can speak to someone else's capacity for forgiveness, but I think that you're atoning for silence in a diner 20 years later, decades later, has, you have atoned with the poems. You have spoken, now what you didn't say then, and in poetry that lasts longer and reaches wider, I think, and can change more lives. Your line that hell always looks better obscured by haze, but as the other poem said, the sun still shines. And that will be our vector for change, or our vector of change, I think he said. Thank you for, thank you, says a guy, but thank you for honoring all of the famous women from history, from Frida Kahlo to Daisy Bates. It reminded me that I just received a week or so ago my first of the 2023 newly minted quarters that the U.S. Mint has put out, or the Treasury has put out, honoring famous American women throughout history. And so, next time, if anybody still gets change, most of us don't anymore. Most of it's all digital money now. But if you ever get a handful of quarters back, look at them. They might celebrate people you don't even know existed. I've recently discovered the film directing career of Ida Lupino. I knew she was an actress, but I never knew that she directed films that were absolutely groundbreaking in terms of talking about sexual assault and, and taboo subjects like that. Edith Wilson, our first basically functional woman president when Woodrow had a stroke and she took over the White House for 2 years. I mean, it's like these famous or forgotten stories that need to live on, because otherwise we won't know what we're already capable of. So thank you for the poems that you shared in that legacy. And as we look toward Valentine's Day this coming week, life is a garden and love a bouquet. And what more perfect image than a sweetheart cherry? It's just, there we go. The natural world bringing in its own love to flaunt desire for us. So just wonderful work, Linda. Thank you. All right. Coming up next, Gary Thomas, grew up on a peach farm. Speaking of stone fruits, from sweetheart cherries to peaches. Gary Thomas grew up on a peach farm outside Empire, California. Prior to retirement, he taught 8th grade language arts for 31 years and junior college English for 7. And someone, if they haven't already, should do a survey of how many of America's great poets are also great teachers or have also been great teachers, because I'm pretty sure it would be about 100%. Gary has presented poetry workshops for literary organizations, festivals, and conferences. His poems have been published or accepted for publication in the Comstock Review, Mocking Heart Review, Monterey Poetry Review, and River Heron Review, among many others. And in the anthology, More Than Soil, More Than Sky, Modesto Poets. Along with Linda, Gary is also a founding member of the Modesto Stanislaus Poetry Center and is a member of the Curriculum Study Commission and of the Stanislaus County writing group known as the Licensed Fools, which is such a delicious name. I can't wait to discover more people who are part of that group. Gary's full-length collection, All the Connecting Lights, was released just last year, August 2022, from Finishing Line Press. Gary, please take away our other half of the afternoon here.
Thank you, Kent, and thank you, Linda, for a wonderful reading. I will be reading most of the poems from my book, All the Connecting Lights, but I'd like to open with a couple of poems that were accepted for the spring issue of the Monterey Poetry Review. This first poem is in the form of a villanelle. It's about spring, and it's called Renaissance. The rain had stopped, the mist swirled back to earth. The sun hung stranded in the dead blue sky, yet all that morning felt like a rebirth. And those I passed seemed capable of mirth, though they nor I could voice a reason why the rain had stopped, the mist swirled back to earth. The silence sought comrades and found a dearth of quiet brothers midst the passers-by, yet all the morning felt like a rebirth. We seek a family, a kindred's birth, whatever truth we find inside each lie. The rain had stopped, the mist swirled back to earth. This globe is but a growth of each child's worth, and each child fails, and some may die. Yet all that morning felt like a rebirth. We all are strangers, cousins, common earth. We speak each other's silences and sigh. The rain has stopped, the mist swirls back to earth, and all this morning feels like a rebirth. This is called This Afternoon. This afternoon, the pasture has erupted in what my father called poor man's cotton, a joke he whispered every time we saw a field of dandelions nod and drift away, parachute by parachute. There are too many to launch the way I used to. Target a steady tunnel of breath at a fragile globe of fluff till everything in front of me expands to migrating seeds, contracts to remnant stalk. Crows cling to sky or familiar branches as their shadows settle their black steel voices into clicking colloquy. Beaks like batons conjure strange needs into auguries of incidents somber, ulterior. Mid-afternoon, and all that presages sundown, smaller birds scuttling under live oaks, ripe peaches succumbing to autumn and gravity, a clack of almonds hitting the tarps or the unlucky hatless farmer. Beyond this tableau, these puffweeds whisper their nicknames to the still drifting florets, spilling themselves completely until their onboard hope, born of a sharp willowa, descends, declares spring. This is the book. It's called All the Connecting Lights, available from Finishing Line Press. And this is another poem about my childhood. The title will give you an idea of how old I am. And there were birds on the riverbank in 1958, singing and setting up shop for the day's business of swooping and stealing from our orchard the first fruits, bitter and unforgettable, thoroughly intoxicating. And there, glinting in the first really hot day, empty white port and Tokay bottles abandoned on levees, clear evidence of last summer's harvesting. Here and there, I can see where they were. Men who climbed ladders and bent low, women who were quiet, nursing babies in old cars, older kids learning to pick and fill pails, dust always drifting, clinging to their voices. And there were dark songs in the morning, mockingbirds and magpies taunting, daring the sky to outsing them, swearing by all rivers and canals they knew that this spring was theirs, and there was no one who could argue, no one who was not already drunk on dawn and ready to float among trees, choosing the likeliest peach, the perfect time for songs always there. This is a poem for anyone who's ever had to endure the school photo. This is called Fourth Grade Photo. I am ugly. I am 9 and ugly. I am 9 and ugly in a crew cut. I am 9 and ugly in a crew cut my parents made me get just before September school pictures were taken. I am scowling. I am scowling to show them and anybody else who is ever forced to see this school picture tucked inside Christmas cards. My mom insists I sign to show them you're thinking of them, to really show them I am outraged to be more close shorn than my dad or older brothers in the pictures of them in private's fatigues from that war they call the big one. I am scowling so that no one will recognize me. I am scowling so that everyone recognizes me and blames my parents for what's been done to me. I am 9. I am 9 and ugly, getting uglier. Wait till you see next year's pictures. I was a junior high school English teacher, taught 8th grade language arts for 31 plus years, and I loved my job. I loved sharing a poem with my students every day for 31 years. I hated administering state mandated bubble tests. And so this is a poem that got started during that time. Let me see if I can find it now. Here it is. When I was watching them filling in their little test booklets and wishing I could speak for them through their voices. It's called Even This Day. Opens with a line by Kenneth Patchen. If a poem can be headed into its proper current, someone will take it within his heart to the power and beauty of everybody. But before that happens, we will sit in lines of 6, all facing the front, our eyes focused on our booklets, our sheets with small circles, our pencils grinding pock marks hard into the faces of our desks. We will pretend for familiarity's sake that any of this matters, that our time is well spent, that if we were to connect the dots, a poem about architecture would appear, perfect in its geometry and reason, beautiful and strong as a cathedral, a cataract of stone and holy water. Anyone reading this after we have done breathing should know that we were as alive as if we had been singing, or drifting on small rafts, heading downstream, staring straight above at all the connecting lights. Losing my place, folks, sorry. Pardon me. Tick, tick, tick. I hate dead air, and I've just provided you with some. couple of poems for my parents. This first one's from my mom. A few years back, I discovered that my mother and Pablo Neruda were born in the same year. So I started to speculate. I wonder what would have happened if. Anyway, this is called Neruda and My Mother. Neruda and my mother would be 118 today, sharing, I think, a bowl of fresh peaches sprinkled with sugar, strewn with cinnamon, a little milk on top for more comfort. He would understand her smooth skin, her full smile ready to sing an old hymn. She would never fathom his poems or whiskey voice, but would love his Chilean sun and beaches. They could talk of children and the sea, look at old photographs of inner tubes and cousins floating belly up in afternoon rivers, learn magic words like Wichita and Santiago, write them down with the other bits of each other's addresses and promise to write. And they would, I know, if only Neruda and my mother had met on a cruise in 1924, traveling to Rangoon, Singapore, Batavia, sleeping on deck to duck the heat, feeling the breeze and its gift of salt. Every time the summer sweat coursed down their lips and all the years after, they would remember the salt, while they thought of the sweet peaches and vowels reuniting someday. And this is a poem for my father. Oak Bow Education. The arrows I knew when I was 8 were made by my father from leftover flooring, extra tongue and groove scantlings, dense planks of oak and maple. And as he sawed them thin and whittled them round and smooth, I breathed in the redolence of their grains and his labor, knowing that each was being fashioned for me alone, that he would fletch and notch the nether ends with jay feathers and great care, sharpen and varnish the business ends, as he called them, each finished shaft mine to aim and find the center of hay bales or lose in the weeds beyond. From this I learned, of course, craft and responsibility, which were the real points. And when he turned his hand to the shaping of a bow selected from the same woods, showed me how he glued alternating strips of oak and maple, let them set and cure all day, then planed them, the curls and coils collecting on the sawdusted floor, followed by finer carving and notching, showed me how to brace the finished bow properly with the buckskin bowstring braided from a discarded bridle. Let me make the maiden pull and aim and détente. I learned the next lesson of a father's love. The creation of the useful, followed by the letting go. I missed live theater, going to see it and being in it. Linda and I have acted at the Prospect Theater in Modesto, California, and I was thinking of that place particularly when I wrote this poem called Stage Left. Our revels now are ended, we might have said, if we'd had the time and allowed ourselves to believe that, but we didn't and we don't. What we did was strike the set, rack the props, mop the floors, lock the stubborn doors for now. We are a community of characters and part of another that needs us to wait in the wings a while until all the curtains we're using can be raised. Past season's ghosts stand ready for their cues. Willie Loman waits to be told he's been let go. Tom Joad will learn how long dust takes to settle. Dee Dee and Gogo stand by a bare tree. Can't go on, go on. We learn our parts as yet unwritten. Imagine this apron as fourth wall. Try not to bump into makeshift furniture. We are such stuff. All the world's a green room now. This poem got started at the peak of the Syrian war as the Battle of Aleppo, Syria raged on. And at the same time, there was an earthquake in Italy and a flood in Louisiana and Florida. This is for all the people displaced, homeless, unhoused, and in crisis. The whole town was homeless. This was the clock tower, bell tower, comm tower, water tower, minaret, where they waited to meet. This room was where they were after that. This restroom arch held the huddled strangers from more harm. This classroom thrived with third graders, poets, engineers, whispers about a paper, a test, an invention, another drill. These were pleated skirts, sneakers, ball caps, balls about to be inflated before the bell, the klaxon, all the metal human sirens sounded in time or too late. This could have been Amatrice, Aleppo, Apalachicola. This is anywhere plans and their opposites meet. Move on, even though, make anything human and in common. So it's going to be Valentine's Day. At the poetry festival run by Most that Jennifer was mentioning, Amanda Moore was our workshop leader, and this was a poem that got started during that workshop. And it's for my wife. Valentine's. By now, we're well past launching and then scuttling resolutions. Daffodils have erupted a week before I take down the last of the outside Christmas light strands, unwinding 600 tiny bulbs round our rows of Sharon tree, trying not to tread on the yellow trumpets that border its bulk and promise of amethyst bugles in early summer. You are inside, ready to begin a quilt for our second granddaughter who will arrive amidst our atmosphere in mid-April. Right now, though, you and I marvel at this wrinkled gray ultrasound image of her face, our first introduction to her, she whose names we don't yet know. We stand close, simply holding the same plain breath. We are easy with each other in this common moment built, as Mary Oliver said, entirely out of attentiveness. Now aware we need to, we finally exhale the past. We find ourselves in each other's shiny, sloppy eyes. We find ourselves likely to resolve, we will remember to do something about Valentine's Day. Maybe we will. Maybe this instant is it. And we have found all we need. A few years back, I attended a poetry reading that was mostly comprised of young poets. And this is called Marcel Marceau at the open mic. Now, if you don't know who Marcel Marceau is, ask your parents. They are used to reading their work this way, these young poets who brandish their splintered screens, scarcely containing their need to read what they tapped 10 minutes before taking the stage. The more rehearsed read their Anne Frank raps, their epistolary anger poems with air stabs and Emily Dickinson references to the one or ones who abandoned them, including their muses, their rhymes coiled into snaky couplets, defiant and proud enough to say thank you when they've done. Some of them forget there's a microphone in front of and not surrounding them. Their shock words that shout become mummery or alternate between full on and lost to the ether. To clap or to finger snap, that was the poem. And I, the elder who appears to chide and be snide and glib enough to ad-lib my years, as if I were not this old because I was that young. I was their young words once, just without a screen to wield or a stage to take over, their visions of justice and the candor to carry them out, only I didn't enough. And my poems are as long as my time here isn't. And this poem wants to say to them, your voice is worth your best words. If you can truly believe that, if you can listen to mine. And finally, for now, I promise I will listen deep for yours, then some more again. Thank you.
Claps, finger snaps, all of the good things, all of the good things. Your voice was worth these best words. I think we all agree. I think we all very much agree. Wow. So many, as I learned this from Bob, as he's hosted this series, the idea of capturing the beautiful lines and images and words that the poets share throughout the reading, and then trying to, bring them back on the table and celebrate them, and just so many. The silence sought comrades, we seek a family. We are all strangers. We all are strangers, cousins, common earth in this common moment. I mean, it doesn't get truer than that. It doesn't get truer than a fourth grader being 9 and ugly. Like, I mean, just like I dare anyone not to identify with that poem. Your music, the crows with their clicking colloquy with beaks like batons, the idea of swearing by all rivers, drunk on dawn, staring up at all the connecting lights. And I think for me, the most poignant definition of poetry I've heard in a long time, that you weren't defining poetry in this poem, but it worked that way for me. The creation of the useful followed by the letting go. Thank you, Gary and Linda, and all of our poets in this series. Thank you for creating useful things and letting them go to the rest of us, letting them go into our common space and our world. It is such a gift, such a blessing. Good energy to carry forward here. So thank you again. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. All of our consortium members, all of our audience members. Please, everybody, stay tuned for next month's reading, which will also be on the 12th of the month. It happens to be the second Sunday of every month at 2 p.m. So March 12th, we will be showcasing the talents of more returning favorites, consortium team members, literary legends in the local area, Simon Hunt and Garland Thompson. Garland, who is here with us today, and will be coming back again with all the good words next month. It's going to be a marvelous afternoon yet again. So again, if there's anybody here who hasn't befriended us on Facebook or subscribed to our YouTube channel, Monterey Bay Poetry Consortium, please make us part of your lives. If you would like to reach out to us directly with any questions or suggestions or concerns, I will put my, give me a moment of dead air here. My email address is in the chat there, as well as Jennifer Legier. So feel free to reach out to either or both of us, and we will be glad to get you even more incorporated into this series as we move forward. So thank you again, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your weekend, your week ahead. Happy Valentine's Day, and we will see you in March. Take care.